On today's show, the home Warriors are back and get their first win in the series against the Kings. How has momentum shifted in this series? Plus, the word of the day is groin, and injury issues crop up again for Kawhi Leonard. It's all coming up today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On NBA. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you might be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We're going to talk about some of the questionable ejections in 76ers-Nets and the latest on Kawhi Leonard's injury and what that means for Clippers Suns. But let's start with the Warriors going back home to San Francisco and beating the Kings to get their first win in the series. They get out to a hot start. It never really feels like that game was in question. They did it without Draymond Green, who, of course, was suspended for the stomp. And they have another game in San Francisco coming up over the weekend. So, Adam, what stood out to you about this game? And do you think about this series differently now that it's 2-1?
Of course, you have to. I mean, this was a game that was tailor-made for the Sacramento Kings to slam the door shut. You didn't want to let doubt creep into your mind. They had played a near-perfect first two games at home, protecting home court. But we know that the Warriors can't win on the road, but they can. But they're very, very good in their home building. So when you get not just one lucky break with Draymond being suspended, but you get another one with Gary Payton not being available tonight with the sickness, to me, this was – I don't want to call it a must win because I still think Sacramento has a great chance at this. But their odds, I mean, really take a hit with blowing this game in the fashion that they did. It wasn't particularly close. They get outscored in every single quarter except for the third in which they tied. To me, this is a huge blow to them.
Yeah, on one hand, you're like, well, Draymond Green was suspended for this one. This is your chance to go into San Francisco, stomp them, no pun intended, I guess, and go up 3-0 without one of their best players on the court. But I actually thought the Warriors played pretty well without Draymond. I don't think they won this game because they didn't have Draymond. I don't think that's not what I'm trying to say. But they started Jordan Poole. They played wide open. Jordan Poole had a much better game at home than he did on the road. He wasn't really shooting that well, but he wasn't like the negative that he was in Sacramento in terms of turnovers and then defensively what he's not providing. But so he was better. There was more space. There was more ball creation and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, man, you watched that Warriors team tonight and it felt like last year's finals team. They were flattening out the opposing offense, with all their defensive activity, doubling on screens and all this stuff. They were keeping the Kings out of the paint, even though that was sort of the obvious thing that the Kings wanted to do, like they did in the first two games in Sacramento. Steph was doing Steph things. The game was up and down, fast-paced. They're grabbing those long rebounds and getting those second chance opportunities. I mean, that was basically how they beat the Celtics in the finals, how they got to the finals in the first place. Hadn't really seen that, especially the rebounding thing in the first two games of this series, and then they got the rebounding edge in this one. Credit to Kevon Looney. Andrew Wiggins kind of looked like Andrew Wiggins again. And so those guys stepped up. And like I said, Steph Curry scoring, 33 points that he ended up with. I mean, he was awesome. So, it looked like the last year's finals team. I don't know if it's sustainable. I guess that's the big question for them.
Well, it's always an interesting and unique circumstance when a team like the Kings, who has a traditional center in Domantas Sabonis. Yes, he has the passing and he's pretty versatile, but he's still a true center. He's not like a switch big. When you go super small and you get to bring out another shooter, so you're going with Curry, Thompson, and Poole with Wiggins, who's a good three-point shooter, and tonight goes 3 of 6. That's always a recipe for, hey, this is going to get difficult. He's going to have to be out on the perimeter a lot. You're going to be running around. And then you just look at the atypical numbers tonight. 53-point attempts from the Warriors, 47 from the Kings. That just creates a very high variance. And I just think the Kings managed it kind of poorly.
This is what the Warriors did to teams last year, though. Like from Memphis to Dallas to whoever, they just get the opponent to play their game. I don't think the Kings wanted to take 47 threes. Maybe 40, 35 to 40. That seems about right. But Sabonis played most of the offense on the perimeter, even though there was no Draymond Green. Kevon Looney wasn't always in the game when Sabonis was in. And so there were times where it's just like, why don't you get into the post? And I thought their best paint action tonight for the Kings was really just pick and roll stuff, getting Sabonis on the move with De'Aaron Fox sort of facilitating. But in terms of just getting him down low and posting him up, he just seemed out of sorts. I thought he was just the rhythm wasn't right for him. He was waiting too long. He was kind of almost getting too deep on those post seals and stuff like that, instead of just sort of like, I felt there was a lot of opportunities that he could have had where it was just like 2 dribbles and then just kind of post up and take a shot over Jermichael Green or even Kevon Looney, who played really good defense against him. But it's just weird, like how the Warriors, like again in the playoffs run last year, got teams to play like this, play their game, and it plays into their hands, and they did that today to the Kings.
And you kind of almost glossed over Looney, just kind of say it, who just rarely mentioning him there.
Yeah.
4 points, 20 rebounds. By the way, 9 offensive rebounds, and then 9 assists on top of that.
He should have gotten one more. He would have gotten the double-double with no points. It would have been.
That would have been a very Draymond-esque of him filling in for Draymond to get a double-double without the point part. But the 9 offensive boards is insane, and it honestly doesn't highlight his best attribute tonight, which was his defense on Domantas Sabonis. And that brings me to what is, I mean, if you win this game, obviously you're up 3-0. Your margin for error is enormous. You have 2 games back, in Sacramento, so it's all but a lock that you'll win this. But now you start to look at some of the margins here and some of the things that have gone on. Domantas Sabonis, I believe, is going to be a -28 overall in a series that he is up 2-1. Yeah. That is a bad sign for a team when he is such an integral part and they've lost the minutes despite winning the games. To me, there are some indicators here where, again, Sacramento has had such a great year and done so many big things, but to lose this opportunity and not just lose it, they scored 97 points against a team missing their best defensive player.
Yep.
To me, this is going to really haunt them and put a lot of pressure on them in Game 4.
I mean, the difference in the first 2 games, because they haven't been shooting well the entire series, but they were winning the rebounding battle. They were winning the turnover battle tonight. They turned the ball over 15 times.
Yep.
Golden State turned it over 11. They got out-rebounded 69-60. So, like, those sort of 4-factor things, they were winning all of them mostly. And then in the first 2 games, and then they didn't really win any of them. Even the free throw difference, it was 23-23. So they didn't get an advantage there where they were getting that advantage in Sacramento. They haven't been shooting well all series, and tonight they shot 23.9% from three-point range. I think that's sort of the story going forward for Sacramento, right, is how can you get those shooting numbers going again? Like Kevin Huerter has not had a good series shooting the ball. You just mentioned Sabonis. He needs to get that efficiency going up. It feels like De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk outside of those 2, and this was not a good Malik Monk game. We knew that was the other shoe was going to drop on that eventually. Yeah. But other than those 2 guys the entire series, nobody else has really made shots. Somebody else has to step up and make shots, especially if the Warriors have sort of figured this thing out.
When people talk about, I mean, one of the big cliches, but I think it's an appropriate, like a true one, is the idea of experience in the playoffs mattering. And this was one of those games that was just going to be different than the previous ones based on who was available. The Warriors tonight look like a team that has been through so many different battles. They've been through so many adjustments and circumstances, and they were ready for it. And Sacramento tonight looked like a team that had not been through all of those and wasn't able to adjust on the fly. So
a little jumpy, right? 4 turnovers in the first 5 minutes for them. Yeah.
But it isn't even jumpy. It's like, when you have to throw out the game plan entirely and say, hey, I know we just won 2 games doing this one thing, but now Game 3 is going to require a completely different thing. It's a completely different team in a lot of ways, and we have to do something different. And they just looked uncomfortable the whole night. Again, 31 in the third quarter, but you get 20 points in the first, 21 in the second, 25 in the fourth, most of which was just garbage time. They just couldn't get it done tonight against a team that they should have been able to find some kind of way in, whether that was offensive rebounds, drawing fouls, or what have you. They just weren't able to get there.
I was really impressed with Golden State's defensive effort. Like, they were meeting up the Kings up high. Yeah, you ended up giving up some mid-range stuff to De'Aaron Fox, who had another good game. But I thought ultimately it got the Kings out of their offense, and the Warriors were able to get into their offense and play in transition, get those transition opportunities and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think the Kings have some stuff that they need to figure out. I still kind of like the Kings in this series, but I don't feel nearly as good about that if I'm a Kings fan after this game, because if that, again, it comes back down to the shooting. Like, if that doesn't turn around for Sacramento, if they're not making those threes and the Warriors are, then yeah, why can't the Warriors come back from 2-1? They came back from 2-1 in the finals. You know what I mean? Like, this is a team that can do it. So
I also think you just have to look at some of the indicators, like some of the messages that are sent. For example, this is the number one offense in the history of the NBA statistically. Tonight, they put up a 94.2 offensive rating.
yeah,
It's one of those things. I think this was true of Memphis, where Memphis had the best home record in the NBA. You drop game one, it makes you question that confidence that you had in, hey, this is where we're good. When you lose in game one, it can rattle your confidence. When you're the number one offense and you get held, not just a little bit, like, okay, we missed some shots or whatever, but a 94 offensive rating, that I think sends a little bit of a message, and it shifts the pressure, in my opinion, all the way over into the Sacramento Kings. You win on Thursday, I think you win the series. You lose that game, and you have to go back to Sacramento, now tied up, and it becomes a 3-game series. And oh, by the way, the Warriors have just galvanized themselves. They've gotten more comfortable with Andrew Wiggins, who obviously missed 2 months for some reason. I think that this becomes a story where it's like, man, did we just allow this sleeping giant to wake up?
Yeah.
And now here they are with their confidence. I think game 4 is huge. And I'll go ahead and say it. This seems a little too strong, but I'll go ahead and go with it. Winner of game 4 wins the series.
I think I'm with you on that. No Gary Payton II also talking about how good the Warriors defense was. They did it without GP2, who was ruled out late with like general illness. I guess he's got like flu-like symptoms and stuff like that. So they might get him back. Obviously going to get Draymond back. And so that obviously helps the Warriors. I don't know. I still think that going into this game after I didn't think the Kings were going to sweep the Warriors. If the Warriors were going to win a game in this series, this was the one, right? First game back at home in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. Even without Draymond, I still felt pretty good about the Warriors going into this one. But you're right. The pressure is now on the Kings. And if they can get game 4 on Sunday, man, what is that, 3:30 Eastern time? We'll see.
If they get it, it's over. I mean, that's the thing. The ball is still in their court. I think they're still favored overall. But, man, game 4 just upped the pressure for them.
Let's go to the Eastern Conference. The 76ers took a 3-0 series lead over the Brooklyn Nets, but did they catch a break from the officials? We're going to talk about that next. But first, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by the Nissan Aria. Nissan's most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria. Let's give it to Kawhi Leonard. How's that? 20 rebounds, 9 assists, just 4 points in the Warriors' win over the Kings. I thought he was, I don't know, the second most important player for the Warriors tonight. You could argue maybe Andrew Wiggins, but like we talked about, his defense on Sabonis, everything he was doing to protect the paint, especially with Draymond out. You could say it was stunningly powerful, just like the Nissan Aria. They want me to incorporate some Aria keywords, right? Like electric, fiercely elegant. How about this one, Adam? Reliable, like the Nissan Aria. Kawhi Leonard delivers on duality, a combination of strength and reliability. Could I say even elegance? I guess it depends on what you think about the braids and the headband. I don't know. The 2023 Nissan Aria packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria. The EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. The 76ers take a 3-0 lead in the series after a wild one in Brooklyn. Close game late. James Harden gets ejected at the end of the third quarter for apparently elbowing Royce O'Neal in the groin.
Apparently, hold up. I take offense to how you're describing this. Hold on a second. We have to go all the way back on this one, too. First 3 minutes of the game, maybe the first 5 minutes, Joel Embiid kicks Nick Claxton in the groin and is not thrown out because he missed the ball.
He missed the groin. He missed the groin. Yes, and Harden had his best shot of the game when he nailed O'Neal right in the groin. So,
would you say he nailed him? We got to get to this, man. Would you say that
maybe not a nail? Nail seems tough. Nail's like a UFC fighter, kind of just throwing a haymaker. I don't know. It was. I thought, like, Harden talked about it after the game in the locker room, and he thought it was ridiculous. Obviously, not shocking at all, given everything about James Harden. But
can you imagine if James Harden was like, "Yeah, man, my bad."
I just that was gonna happen. Brain fart on me. I didn't think the ref was gonna see it. You know, they're usually not watching me with these calls or whatever. Like, no, he was like, I didn't even hit him in the groin, and like everybody just keeps saying groin when you talk about the first 3 minutes of Embiid, like it was in the groin region, but he didn't hit him in the groin, and then Harden with the groin, and then Harden saying groin, and everybody was saying groin. A lot of groin talk, but
a lot of groin talk.
I don't know. I didn't think it was that egregious. I didn't think he should have been. To me, it did look like just him using his off arm to try to move O'Neal, which if you wanted to call that a regular foul, I'm good with it. But for the flagrant 2 there, that to me was a little much. I don't know if it was a makeup ejection based on the Embiid stuff, but the Harden thing in a vacuum felt like a little too overreactionary to me by the officials.
And then later in the game, Nick Claxton, who was having
Yes.
a phenomenal game,
Yes.
dunked all over Joel Embiid.
Second time.
All over him and flexes on him. Now, was the flex stupid? Yes. Did it toe the line of what would typically get a technical in a regular season? Yes. But he gets thrown out by Tony Brothers, and that decided the game.
Yep.
That decision to throw him out decided the game. And here's what's weird about this, Wes.
You could also argue that the decision not to throw Embiid out earlier decided the game, but I'm sorry.
It did. And this is what I'm getting at. But by the way, Joel Embiid had a horrible game. He makes a game-saving block, which was a phenomenal play. It was really his only good play of like the entire fourth quarter. He had nothing but terrible plays, and he had a good play, that game-saving, maybe the biggest play of the game, to rotate over and get a block on Spencer Dinwiddie. But
opposite side of the paint from the uppers, like from the free throw line to get that, like at the very last millisecond before it would have been goaltend. Yeah, it was a great block.
But this would have been a disaster from Joel Embiid. 5 of 13 from the field, 14 points, 10 rebounds, just 5 turnovers. He had 2 assists and 5 turnovers. It was a really rough game from him. And I just felt like Brooklyn, who really brought it in this game, I just thought Brooklyn was a little bit in his head. Claxton a little bit in his head, just taking it to him.
Yeah.
And then he gets thrown out. And I sit here and I think, after the game, they explained this, but you knew all along. So Embiid, early on in this game, that kick was intentional. James Harden, I don't know. Like James Harden, I think, was trying to push off. He was doing a patented James Harden, like where he, he's trying to like disguise a little bit of his initiating contact. But I don't think he was trying to punch him in the nuts. Let's be honest. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is Harden tries to hide it, and you go low when you're trying to hide it. If you go up high at the neck, that's an automatic flagrant, whatever it's going to be. And obviously the official could see it easier. Like if you're going to push the guy out of the way, that's where you go to the midsection. I mean, that's.
But Embiid's was on purpose. Like I don't know if he was
100%.
trying to kick him in the groin, but he was trying to kick him. Like he was trying to kick Nick Claxton.
He intended to hurt Nick Claxton.
Yeah,
it was a counterpunch.
And they left him in with the flagrant 1 and then gave the flagrant 2 to Harden, and it was just absolutely absurd. But then to put the cherry on top of throwing out Nick Claxton, when you knew, everybody in the building knew when Nick Claxton went out, they brought in Dorian Finney-Smith to guard Embiid. Yep. Claxton's small enough already as in a mismatch, but Dorian Finney-Smith, the game was over. And shouts to Tyreke Maxey, who did a great job. I mean, he was phenomenal.
10 straight points in the fourth quarter. Unbelievable.
He still had to go out and win it, and he hit it with some really clutch shots in this game. But I'm sorry, the details of the basketball part of this game are like the second story. The first story is the crazy sequence of decisions.
It's a shame because you mentioned the defense and Nick Claxton, what he was doing to bother Joel Embiid. They were totally in Philly's head. And the Sixers are susceptible to kind of getting in their head, right? You could shake the 76ers. I think that much has been proven. Yeah. And the Brooklyn I respect it. Like their whole strategy was, let's just piss him off. And from the very get-go, it was Claxton, it was dunking on Embiid and flexing and doing all that stuff. Getting Embiid all riled up, the constant doubles before Embiid even got the ball just to mess with him a little bit. Like the ball pressure from half court on, like they were just out there to make the 76ers angry. And it worked. And it definitely worked. And they got Harden ejected, and they probably should have gotten Embiid ejected. But you're right. Like, despite that great story, it felt like Brooklyn could have stole this game, maybe should have stole this game if not for the questionable officiating. And that becomes the story after this one. Embiid, do you think he should have been ejected for the first one?
Like, I'll be honest, early on in this game, I didn't think he should be ejected. But I did think it was like an intentional kick or what have you. But I just am not a fan of ejecting players in general. Yeah. It's my default position. But if you're going
to eject Claxton and Harden for what they got ejected for,
if you were to rank the offenses for which one was worse, Embiid's easily the worst of the 3. Yes. And to be the one that didn't get kicked out is so crazy. So I don't think any of them should have been kicked out. It's the playoffs, man. There's got to be a little bit of a different rule for this, or otherwise. And here's the thing, Wes. This playoffs, I hate talking about officiating just because I think it's like the lowest form of conversation. But this playoffs, it's unfortunately been inescapable. Players in foul trouble, players suspended, technical fouls, guys being thrown out. I'm looking at this going, What is this league right now? What is this? It's absurd.
This is like NFL playoffs where you're like, was that a catch or not a catch? And you do an hour on radio of like, was this a catch or not a catch? And now in the NBA, we get the fortunate or unfortunate assignment of being like, is this a flagrant 2 or not a flagrant 2? Should this be an ejection or not an ejection? Like, we don't even really know anymore. I forget what NBA player tweeted. It was straight up just like, what's the difference between a flagrant 1 and a flagrant 2? I don't know anymore. And so you're right. It's the worst kind of sports talk radio is officiating. It's never good. Nobody goes into a game wanting to talk about the officiating, and it feels like every fan wants to leave every game blaming the officials for their team losing. But in this instance, you have to talk about it because it decided the game. Are you not to take anything away from Tyrese Maxey? He would tell you he decided the game, but the officiating they've got their fingerprints all over this one.
Philadelphia, though, I will say it's been an unimpressive 3-0 lead for them. I mean, yes. I don't think Brooklyn's very good, and they have no size. I don't think the scheme defensively that they've thrown out there has been necessarily like impressive. Mikal Bridges has had some good moments, but I don't know, like you see in the clutch, they're not a team that knows what they're going to do. By the way, Spencer Dinwiddie, horrible in the clutch tonight, as he has been for a lot of the post-trade era of this Nets. They're a team that can be really good for about 43 minutes, but they're not good late in the game. But nonetheless, you look at the 76ers, and I just look at them and I go, the gap between the Nets and their next round opponent, the Celtics, is immense.
Yes.
And it is going to be a bucket of cold water on them if they continue to play this way.
There was a period at the end of the regular season where the Sixers looked like world beaters, right? Like they were going to go on to make the NBA Finals. How can you match up with Joel Embiid and all this stuff? But if Brooklyn has done anything, maybe they kind of threw the book out on Embiid and say, hey, if you double him early in possessions, early in the shot clock, you could really bother him. I thought Embiid could have done a better job of trying to get into the post and establish position, and James Harden could have been a better playmaker. There's things to counter it, and I'm sure Doc Rivers and that group will figure it out. But yeah, it kind of feels like this is the worst team ever to be up 3-0. Like this is the least impressive 3-0 lead I've ever seen. But
and I'll say one last thing about Embiid. Sure. He looks exhausted. And he looks exhausted in the second quarter. But by the fourth quarter of this game, I mean, it looked like he could barely get up and down the court. Yeah. So again, just another thing where you have an unimpressive game and you looking like this. You got 3 more rounds. You got 3 more rounds ahead of you.
Tough sledding, man. All right, coming up, what Kawhi's injury means for the Clippers and what they're doing to keep these games against the Suns close. It's coming up next. But first, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The Suns beat the Clippers 129-124. This was a close one at the end. Bones Highland misses an open 3 that could have cut the deficit to 2, but it rims out. Suns make some free throws. They get the win. They go up 2-1 in the series. But this was a Clippers team already without Paul George for the series. Then a few hours before the game, they find out Kawhi Leonard not going to be able to play. He apparently sprained his right knee in game 1, was able to play through it in game 2, but couldn't make it for game 3. The Clippers are saying it's unrelated to that right ACL tear that kept him out all of last season. He's going to be day-to-day going forward. So I don't know what sort of chances I would have given the Clippers in this series, even with Kawhi, despite having won game 1, keeping this one close. But now with Kawhi dealing with this injury, it sort of just feels like the series is over to me. I will give the Clippers credit for the way they fought tonight, but I don't know. Like, I just still, you and I were sort of talking before recording, like, I don't know how impressed I am with the Suns in this series, but it just feels like there's no way the Clippers can win this thing if Kawhi is hobbled, they're not playing, and without Paul George already.
Well, look, I mean, obviously they're going to need Kawhi Leonard back. They're going to need that, they're going to need to have him to close this out. But hold on a second. So there was no Paul George tonight. There was no Kawhi Leonard. The Clippers had 18 turnovers, which is a lot, more than average. The Suns got 45 points from Devin Booker on 18 of 29 shooting, extremely efficient. They get Kevin Durant having an efficient night, including 11 of 11 from the field. You have Torrey Craig going 3 of 4 from the three-point line, and you squeak by? That's, to me, I look at this and I go, Phoenix now has 2 games where they have had outlier performances shooting, and they're a good shooting team. But they have had outlier, including from Torrey Craig. What was he, 6 of 7 or something like that the other night? Like an incredible 5 of 7 or something like that. He has been shooting the ball really, really well. Tonight, 3 of 4. And yet they're squeaking by against Bones Highland, Zubats, Batum. We get 20 minutes from Mason Plumlee. Like, this is, I am unimpressed with the Phoenix Suns. I actually think that they played very well offensively. I don't think they're a very good defensive team with a lot of defensive upside. Oh, by the way, you get a good game from Biyombo tonight, where he ends up a plus 18 in his 11 minutes. So those are the minutes that determine the game. I am unimpressed with Phoenix. I have no idea what the status is of Kawhi Leonard. I mean, he only made it 2 games in this playoffs. It almost feels like a parody. But if he has anything to give, I just like the Clippers here because I'm so unimpressed with what I've seen from Phoenix.
I guess my biggest question with Kawhi is, even if he does play, is this knee sprain going to be bothering him where he's not the guy that he was in the first 2 games? And really in that first game, man, first game, he was unbelievable. In the second game, he was good. But if he could be game 1 Kawhi, then yeah, I'm with you, man. I think the Clippers can win this series because, yeah, the upside talent, like they have Kawhi at the very top, obviously. But beyond that, like the Suns obviously have more talent at the top of their roster. But then you kind of just go through the rest of the roster and the kind of guys you have to play for 48 minutes. And the Clippers just sort of come in waves of long physical guys where it kind of feels like the Suns just don't have that depth. And like I said, I credit the Clippers. They're playing way harder than the Suns. The ball pressure is sort of the same thing that I was talking about with Brooklyn, how they were pressuring early in the shot clock against Joel Embiid. Like the Clippers are just doing that to every Suns player that has the ball, crossing half court. Like Kevin Durant at the end of that game had a hard time just getting the ball across the court because of the ball pressure. I think it was Eric Gordon or Norman Powell. I can't remember exactly who it was, but like they just have so many guys and they're playing so hard and they're flying around and they're a good shooting team. They have been basically during this like whole Paul George, Kawhi Leonard era. So they could shoot with them on balance. They could shoot with the Suns. But if Kawhi is anything other than what he was in game 1, I don't see how it happens for them in the series.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, obviously with Kawhi, predicting injuries is impossible. Ty Lue, before the games, was asked when he found out that Kawhi Leonard would be available. He said like in the middle of the night or something like that. So it's not even like they had a lot of time to prepare for this.
And then them saying Kawhi was extremely frustrated, them just being open about like, that's not a good sign. Like it would be one thing if Kawhi was like, yeah, I'll take this 1 game off, but I'll be back out there. But he sounded very, very, apparently very frustrated by this.
But the bigger story to me is that the Phoenix Suns have an incredible amount of high-end talent, maybe the most in the NBA between Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, those 2 alone. And then when you add in Chris Paul, who, by the way, has struggled but closed this game very nicely tonight, and then DeAndre Ayton, another guy who, is very talented. That's a lot of top-end talent. But past that, they are not a good team. I don't think they have a great identity. And then they have some things going against them. One, I don't think they're a very versatile defensive team. No. And this is part of why they can't stop, even this depleted Clippers team. And then on top of that, there is a little bit of a math thing going on here. We just talked about teams that took 50 and 47 threes, and the Kings and the Warriors. They took 27 tonight. They have some great shooters, but they are a mid-range heavy team. And as great as they are at that, you kind of have to be on fire every single night just to keep up with the math. So to me, I wanted to see what this Suns team looked like in the playoffs before kind of reserving judgment on them. But right now, from where I stand, I just think they're very beatable.
Yeah, they rely a lot on that mid-range game. And even if you basically shoot 50% from mid-range with no free throws, you're like, oh, that's an offensive rating of 100. You know what I mean? Like that's not a great. So they rely a lot on free throws. They got to the line 46 times tonight. 30.
They're very good at getting to the line. I mean, they are. Their ability to one-on-one and just get by guys is impressive. So they're going to get to the line. That'll help out the math game a lot.
It does. But you're right. Like it does feel like they give up. They sort of turn down a lot of 3-pointers to sort of dribble into these mid-range shots. It's a very disjointed offense. There's still no rhythm. Chris Paul is still trying to figure out what he's doing. Rob Mahoney at the Ringer actually had a great story on that this morning. And if people want more detail on that and kind of how it's been an adjustment for Chris Paul, who's sort of just used to controlling the offense, and now he's sort of like this side piece, next to Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. So it's been weird, and it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of time for them to figure it out, especially against this Clippers team that is kind of mucking things up for them and not really letting them get into a flow. So I don't know. To your point, like I'm not like just like the Sixers, like up 3-0. I'm not that impressed with the Suns being up 2-1 against the depleted Clippers, and it feels like the West is now wide open. Where I think a lot of people going into the playoffs were like, "Hey, I don't care that the Suns have only played 8 games together. They've
Right.
got the talent; they're going to go on." I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that you could say that that's the case for sure.
And here's the crazy thing. Coming into tonight through 2 games, the Suns were averaging 21 and a half free throw attempt or 3-point attempts. That's the fewest of any of the 16 playoff teams. The next closest is the Knicks at 29.
Yep.
8 more threes per game for the second fewest, Mark. If you just go to the average, of the playoff teams, you're somewhere around 33 or 34. So you're talking about 13 or 14 more threes per game. That's a big gap. And again, it's about who they are. Next year, they're going to have I believe, we'll have a much more well-rounded roster with better spacing and more versatility defensively and all those things. But right now, you're counting on Torrey Craig to be like your main 3-point shooter, off of the main stars or what have you. And it's just tough. It's going to catch up to him at some point.
Yeah, I don't know, because you look at the other teams that they could play in the West. The Nuggets don't take a ton of threes, and that would be probably the team they meet in the next. But if they somehow make it past the Nuggets, who that's not a guarantee whatsoever, especially with what we saw from the Suns. If it's the Kings or the Warriors, or if those are teams that take a ton of threes, I don't know. Maybe and then the Grizzlies or the Lakers are coming out the other side. I don't know. Those teams don't take a ton of threes. The Lakers take a few more, but maybe there's enough to get away with it. I guess it just depends on the matchups, but they got to figure out a lot of questions on offense.
We'll have to see. I think we have good series in the West, though. I really do. I don't think that this Clippers Sun series is over. I mean, we'll see what happens with Kawhi Leonard. If he's just out, if that's the news, then that one's over. But I don't think it is. Obviously, Memphis and Lakers is exciting. And then Kings Golden State just reclaimed, I think. For a second there, I was going to say the Clippers Suns was the best series. I think Kings Warriors just reclaimed the title for best series in the first round.
Oh, it never left for me. That was always the best series. I was looking forward to Suns Clippers the most, and then the Kings went up 2-0. Actually, after that, like halfway through game 1, I was like, this is the best series.
But
now Lakers Grizzlies is a lot of fun too, just because of all like the poke and the bear drama stuff. But what team, just quickly before we leave this one, who have you been most impressed by after the first few games in the Western Conference?
I mean, I think Denver, if you look at Denver right now, I think they have the 3rd best defensive rating, which nobody saw coming. Yes, they're going up against the Minnesota Timberwolves, but everybody wanted to know what Jamal Murray would look like in the playoffs when they came around again. Well, he just dropped another 40-piece.
He was almost my Nissan Player of the Week, but I just had to give it to Loon.
Yeah. There you go. Jamal Murray had his 5th 40-point game in the playoffs, which is really impressive for a guy that's 26 years old and missed 2 playoff runs already in his career. So I think you have to say Denver. There was plenty of questions surrounding them coming into this, but they've answered a lot of them through 2 games. Now they go on the road. And if it weren't them, I would say Sacramento. But I'm sorry, Sacramento gave up that crown tonight with this horrible loss.
Feels like maybe everybody's like, the Nuggets got the tough bracket. It's Suns Clippers on their side. They'd be better off being on the other side. I'm like, now I kind of feel like they're on the right side of the bracket. You know what I mean?
I think the West is even. This is the thing: is the West is really, really. These games are. I mean, you go across and you look at Atlanta. You look at the Miami Bucks series, and it's a little bit less impressive, I think, top to bottom. But the West right now, you just have a lot of teams that have flaws, but they also have some things that are pretty impressive about them.
Yeah, I mean, people are predicting literally every team from 1 through 7 to maybe make the finals. Poor Timberwolves, not you guys. Anyway, that'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure that you're subscribed, and the show will be back on Monday with the biggest stories from the big NBA playoff weekend. That'll do it. Adam, thanks for joining me. Have a great weekend.
You as well.